Living my bucolic life, free of the city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello, are we ready to get started with this dress? It is Butterick, and the version I'm going to be doing is closer to this one, but it's going to have the long sleeves and the cuffs. You know, since we altered the pattern, might as well try it. And I think the only other difference I'm going to be doing is, since I made that jacket and played with trim, I was digging in all my trim box. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of trim. I'm going to use more trim. I have this, lots and lots of this, okay? So I am actually going to be running that around the lapels, maybe around the bottom. I just feel like using it up, and honestly, a fabric this lighthearted and whimsical, it can stand trim. And so that's what I'm going to do. But I want to show you one other thing, total side note before we get started. All right, so the first piece that we're going to be working on is the bodice, and I am still waiting for my new microphone to come. I ordered it. It kind of fell off the radar in tracking somewhere in Missouri. So right now what I'm doing is improvising. I have my wire that was plugged into my wireless jack just plugged straight into my camera, so I can only get 3 feet from my camera. So we're going to have a lot of just close, and I need to make sure that I remember I can't walk away. But let me turn the camera down so we can look at my piece. And I'll try to keep this wire out of the way, but you know what, we're just going to have to deal with it for a little bit, so sorry about that. All right, so this is my altered piece, and yeah, lots of comments about the whole process and everything, and understand I did it this way because that's what the pattern called for. I did it exactly the steps that the pattern called for. Is this my preferred method? Oh my goodness, no. If I was doing it my way, would I have done it in different steps and in different orders and with different placements? Oh yes, but you know what? We're doing it their way, and we're going to see how it works. And I think it's going to be okay. It's just that the process of getting it to this stage was slightly painful. So with that said, let me get started showing you how I'm going to mark this thing. Okay, so first of all, the buttonhole and button placement I am not marking until I'm ready to put those on. I've adjusted the length here, I've made other adjustments, these can change, so I'm just going to set those aside for right now. What I'm going to be marking though are the dots. This is the dot where my center front is, like this should be the point right here, and I'm going to want to make sure that that is the point is closed, because from this point up is where the lapel is. Okay, so I'm going to mark that one. Also this one up here, which is marking where the collar starts on the lapel. This one here, which is, I think, a clipping line or something with the collar. Now, as far as my darts, if you remember, I had to, well, my darts are totally different than the pattern darts. So what I'm going to be doing is my dart top is now way down here, okay, with multiple layers of tape on it. And so I'm marking this dot. I'm going to mark the two bottom ones and the notches down here. For my dart over here, which you know is now very wide, I will mark the top, these, and these. When I make this dart, I'll probably trim it because that's a lot of fabric just to be hanging out there. But that's what I'm going to do. So marking this, my new dart here, my new dart here, these places, and yeah. So I've marked it on the wrong side and I've got my darts for each one. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make my darts. And to make them, again, I stick a straight pin down one dot and up the other. And I'm going to clip a thread up here at the top of dot, which is going to show me exactly where I need to fold it. Okay. Tuck this down like that one. Tuck this in here, and I do mark my stitching line, so I'm ready to go ahead and stitch that. So I'm going to fold my other darts the same way, except this one. This dart is crazy wide in my opinion, so this is what I'm going to do, because this is a fairly thick fabric and I don't need all of that. What I'm going to be doing is actually trimming it. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to trim it first. And I'm going to draw a 5/8 inch seam allowance on the inside. My mark is wanting to disappear on me already. Okay, so this is my stitching line. 5/8 in, I drew another one. That's going to be my trimming line, just to get some of that bulk out of there. So I am just going to cut that right now so I don't have to worry about it. And that is gone. So now I will do this the same way, you know, matching up my dots, matching up my point and everything. But when I go to press it, I'll be pressing it open. Hard time trying to figure out how to show what I iron without the camera steaming up. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, for demonstration purposes only, I'm going to turn the steam off just so you can see what I'm doing, and then I'll come back, turn the steam on, and finish it. So with that, I am shutting off my steam. And this is a clean ironing board cover. I actually just washed it last night. It's just stained, so just ignore that. Anyhow, this is my side dart, and I am pressing it open, just normally open up to that point where I have it together. Now I'm going to stick, this is like a wooden knitting needle that I glued a button on a long time ago for a scarf or for a shawl. I'm sticking that inside here, okay? And that's going to open it up enough that I can just push it straight down, okay? So with that, I'm going to press my center dart. Actually, I need to stick that back in there. We're just going to leave that knitting needle in there for a minute until I get that little top part formed. All right, now pull it out. Oh, it does not want to press without steam, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. So anyway, this is pressed open. This is also pressed open. It's just to a point. Okay, so with this part pressed open then, and this initially formed, I'm just using the top of my ham because it's very round, and so am I, to press this. Now the front dart, I'm going to be pressing towards the center, the front center. So, in theory, this point here where these two darts are pointing to is actually my apex, which is not center with this flower. This thing is just encrusted with flowers, so it was kind of hard to get one. So, in theory, this point here is the center of my boob. So I think I am safe with the big flowers. Okay, so I wanted to show you on this dart. It was bothering me the way it looked. So, you know, my knitting needle went in about this far, but I still have this far to go. I have a big fat yarn needle. And I am sticking it, and it'll go all the way in. And that's going to give me a really nice dart, okay? So now with that yarn needle in there, I can press it. And I have a nice straight dart. And then I left some yarn on the outside so I can just pull it out without having to grab a hot needle. So with the darts done, the last thing I'm going to do on this front bodice is I went ahead and marked it. There's a dot here and a dot here. And we're going to have to clip this. And so I'm going to put reinforcement stitching, basically stay stitching, right on this line, and this line is at 5/8 inch in, so that will be my stitching line. So I'm going to sew, and they show starting like midway, but on the pattern itself the line goes most of the way up, so I'm going to go most of the way up and over to this dot on both sides. Alright, I just saw a update. My microphone is somewhere in Indiana now, so that is good. It's getting closer. So this is my bodice back, and if you remember from my making this pattern thing, these notches were wrong, so I am just skipping those. I've clipped these notches up here. I am marking this little triangle here, which is the intersection of all points at the shoulder. Oh, you can't see that. Hang on. Okay, this triangle right here, that's the one that marks where everything comes together at that shoulder point. And I am marking this point here, which is a sleeve placement point. And then I have my dart down here at the bottom, which is slightly modified because I had to shorten the waist in the back. And just like that. So then I flip it over and I'll mark everything on this side, draw out my dart legs like I like to do, and then I can sew those. Okay, so I'm over here to sew the darts in my back, and I want to show you this thing. I was reading a sewing hints book from I think it was like the 1970s, and I saw this and there's like, well, that makes a lot of sense, so I thought I'd show you. Basically, you sew with a scrap of fabric, and so you clip it off at the end. I'm going to run off, this is the point where I'm running off. Right here, I'm actually going to backstitch, you know, don't shoot me. There's some dart purists who hate to backstitch, but on something like this where the fabric is so thick, I don't think it's going to make a difference. And then I can just clip this side, okay, and it comes off. Now the benefit of it is you don't waste a lot of thread, but also when you go to start a new one, there's no way you can get one of those little rat nests of thread in the very beginning. I can just come off of here, go straight on there, back stitch it, and keep going. And I thought that was pretty darn handy, so I thought I'd pass that on to you. Okay, this wire's driving me nuts. All right, so with my darts done and pressed, what I need to do now is clip this seam, or this little point here that goes up to that stay stitching corner that's in the front collar. Clip that, and now I'm going to go and serge around the very outside edge of all of these pieces before I attach them together. I serge just at the very, very edge. I am not trying to cut anything off. You know, if I cut some off, you know, that happens. But my intention is to just barely overcast the edge and cut off any loose threads. When I get to a corner, I'm going to make sure my needle goes to the very last place it can, raise up my needle, lift the presser foot, turn the whole thing, and set it back down. And then keep going. But you can see here, this stuff is just going to want to fray really, really easily. And by serging it now, after I have all my darts in, it's going to hold the darts in place, but also if I was to serge it before I put the darts in, I'd have extra thickness there that I really don't want. Same thing here. And what that does is it gives you nice, neat little corners, you know, very sharp, neat little corners. So for an inside corner, you know, this is clipped, so it's a lot easier. But if it wasn't, what I would do is come up to that point and then just kind of fold my fabric out flat so it's in line, and then just continue on. So kind of like what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pretend it's not clipped. So I'm just going to straighten this side out and keep going that way. Okay, so now I'm going to sew my shoulders and my sides, just matching them up. The instructions say to ease in the back. Honestly, there's such a little amount to ease in. I'm not even going to worry about that. It's flat. If you've done an alteration for a rounded shoulder or something, you might have more, but in general, that's nothing to worry about. And I'm going to sew my side seams, just matching them up. Do them both at 5/8 of an inch. So while we're just talking sewing tips in general, I just wanted to point one other thing out. And you probably know this. You don't have to pull everything out every single time. Like, say I'm sewing my back, so I did up the side, and then I just moved it to the shoulder. I did this shoulder, now I'm just going to scoot this one over, back stitch it here, and keep going. Okay, back stitch it, then move this side seam up here, like that. Pull my pin out, there it is. So, you know, just little things, but, and you probably already know, I just thought I would mention it while I'm in that train of thought. All right, so while I'm over here pressing my seams open, I'm actually gonna fuse on some stay tape from this point here where I spliced it open around the back of the neck and to the same part on the other side. All right, I want to show you something that's kind of interesting to me. I just kind of pinned it on here just for a little look-see of what we've got going on. And when I was working on the pattern, and yes, that flower is precarious, but you know, we will live. When I was working on this pattern in the tissue paper, you saw how close I had it on here. It looked like it was very, very tight. And in the directions, it did say that the fabric version will be looser than the tissue paper version. Okay? But look, it is. It definitely is. Now, I think it's going to fit well, and I think it has the amount of ease that I need to make it comfortable. I just thought that that was kind of interesting, how much more flexible, I guess, fabric is than tissue paper, which shouldn't be a big surprise, but there you go. So, you know, one more thing learned today. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is start working on the collar, and there's two pieces that you cut out, you know, as usual. One is interfaced and one is not. Now, the interfacing I'm using is very, very lightweight, and that is because my fabric is so thick that you would think I want to pick an interfacing that's comparable to the weight of the fabric. Usually I do. I just want a much softer collar. You know, I understand, you know, having very crisp, you know, very upright and everything type collars, but I just want this to be softer. But I want the interfacing basically to hold it together and give it its body, but not make it rigid. So that's why I'm using the very, very lightweight fusible interfacing. So I'm just going to cut this out, and I was just now reading a comment, and I've had the question before, so I thought I'd deal with it right here. It's about my dress form. So I bought my dress form used. It's the one that I use a lot here is actually a dummy from a full-figured woman's dress shop that was closed. And so it was on a short little stand, but when I was looking at it and looking at the measurements, it seemed so perfect that I had to get it, and it was a swinging deal, so why not? I just modified the stand so it was the right size and things like that. But I found it used. I found it on a private listing on Facebook Marketplace, so I can't really tell you where to get it. But I can tell you there are a ton of used dress forms out there. And Actually, I bought another used dress form just the other day, and it is a uniquely you dress form. And that is the kind with like the foam on the inside, and then it has basically a canvas zip up the back shaper around it that you zip that up and it fits you. And I bought that. At first I was looking at it and it looked way too small for me, but then I was looking at the shaper, and the shaper has like 1-inch seam allowance in every single seam. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. So I bought it, and I will be doing a video of altering that one to fit me. But I hope that helps. I'm sorry, I don't really have a certain supplier. It's more of a go exploring and find what you can, for me at least. But also the question was how to contact me. And I thought I had an email listed in my community page or my About Me page. I'll have to go look. But basically it is bucoliclife.mail, mail.com. So anyhow, that's it. Let me go ahead and fuse this interfacing onto this collar piece, and I'll be right back. So when I had it up on the dress form with just the lapel folded back, I decided I kind of liked that contrast of the light against the crazy colors. I like that. I think that crazy color against crazy color, it might just blend in. But this, you know, it has a hint of the pattern, but not so much. So I'm just playing with it, playing with my little trim, you know, because it's fun, and this is a very I am not serious fabric. And I think that'll be cute. So that's how I am going to be doing my collar and everything, is so that from the side that you can see, the public side, it's going to be the actual underside of the fabric. I think that'll be nice. But I don't need to deal with that right now, because this collar piece I'm sewing on is still the under collar, so I will make that, you know, to match how it should be. Okay, so first of all, I just went back and I just put a little mark where my center back is. I'm going to start lining it up there with my right sides together. I'm going to stick a pin there. Now, these dots should match up here. And I'm probably going to have to clip this bodice somewhat, which is why I had to put the stay tape on there. So you know what, just so it's going to form a little easier, I am going to clip it about 1/4 inch in, which goes through part of the bias, but not through the part of the stay tape that's actually doing its job here. So I'm just going to clip that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the stay tape I used is this one, where it's like a fusible bias strip on this side, and this side has like a little stay tape sewn onto it. So I'm clipping the fusible bias part. All right, so now I'm going to stick a pin through this mark here and line that up with my shoulder seam right where this stay stitching is ending at, okay? So that is going to match up right there. And I'm going to do that on this side also. Pin that, match that up in the seam where that stay stitching ends. Try to make it flat. Okay. Now this part in here where I clipped it, you can see the clipping is good because it opens it up some. So I'm just going to put a pin in here. Open this up a bit. And put a pin in here. Okay, now this dot matches up with this corner that was clipped here. All right, so I'm just putting my little pin just on the inside of that. And I am putting it so that this opens. Come on, focus here. So that this is opened, my slash and my corner here is centered on it. Okay. And put another pin halfway. Okay, do the same thing over here. You stick a pin through this dot and just See if you can see. Here's my stitching line just on the inside of it. The opposite side that where the slash is, okay? And matching that up so that my little point is centered in there. Come on, right there. So my point is centered in there, okay? And stick a pin in between those two. And let's see. We also need to go from this dot here, gets matched up with where the dot would be on here, which is exactly the point where my stay stitching ends. So I'm just going to line it up with that point there. And then put one pin in between. And do the same thing over here. So you can see you have to be really careful with your marking and everything, and if you do, this should line up really well. If you don't, if you're not careful with all that, you could have some headaches. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to sew, basically dot to dot it. So from here, here, all the way around and back down to this dot. All right, so I've got it sewn on, and I wanted to point out a couple things to you. First of all, when you're actually sewing it, it would be a lot easier if you could sew it looking at the bodice side. And that is because you need to make sure that you're not cutting your corners too short. So like my stay stitching is here. I need to make sure that I'm sewing on this side of my stay stitching. Otherwise, these are going to want to peek through, and you're only dealing with maybe a 1/16 of an inch leeway. And also, if you're looking at it from this side, you can move that piece around some. And the other thing is, if you feel like you're going to have trouble with this, it wouldn't hurt at all just to, while you have it just placed together, just to hand baste it along the edge to make sure that it's very securely set in place and that these are not going to want to move, and then flip it over and stitch it by machine. But anyway, that is done, and the next step is to trim the seam to 1/4 inch. So that is the entire seam, I am assuming. Okay. Anyhow, I clip it here, and I'm just going to come in and trim it all along the edge here. Like that. Okay. Well, I got to the point where my pinking shears couldn't go through my fabric, so I was just using my regular fiskars that I use, and then they couldn't go through it. So now I'm using my serrated marks, you know, pulling in the big guns for this. And when I was sewing this, I actually ran out of bobbin, so you can see right there, what a mess. But, you know, these things happen. Okay, so it's basically 1/4 inch. I'm just going to trim this little piece here too, so that my fabric side is still full length over here. All right, so with all of this trimmed, what I also did is I just came in and I just put a little clip to these corners, you know, just for right now to make sure it's all going to work okay. But we need to press these seams open. So very carefully, I will probably be using a seam roll or something like that. I'm going to come in here and press my tiny little 1/4 inch seam open as much as possible, and then carefully at the corner and then come back down. All right, so I pressed it open and I just put my seam roll underneath it, pressed this part, moved it this, moved it that, you know. So, but I wanted to show you clipping the little corners here is a very good thing because there's a lot of manipulation to do right there. And so that you can make this part flat and all the way around. And this is what it looks like from the right side. Okay, so you have your little point that you come to here, and the back of the collar, and the little point it comes to over here. Okay, so just be careful with your stay stitching, be accurate with your dots, and you should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the dress form for a minute because we need to get started working on sleeves now.